At the Fort Liberty firing range, my father, Colonel Victor Quinn, roared in front of my own soldiers. "Look at her. A sergeant's salary is barely enough for dog food, Harper." He thought he was breaking me. He thought he was putting his failed daughter in her place. What he didn't know was that I was already silently investigating the criminal conspiracy that he was running. A conspiracy that was selling out the lives of his own men for profit. This is the story of how I used the skills he despised to destroy the empire he built on lies. My name is Harper Quinn. I'm 35 years old, a sergeant first class in the United States Army. And at this moment, I was standing in what felt like the seventh circle of hell. It wasn't just the oppressive wet blanket heat of a North Carolina summer pressing down on firing lane 7 at McKellar's Lodge. It was the hostile silence that felt even more suffocating. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down my spine, but it had nothing to do with the temperature. From the periphery, I could feel the sideways glances, hear the low, venomous whispers that coiled through the humid air. "That's Colonel Quinn's daughter," one voice murmured, just loud enough for me to catch. I can still see that spring day in North Carolina, the air warm and sweet with fresh grass, the kind of day that makes you believe anything's possible. I was just 18, clutching an acceptance letter from UNC Chapel Hill, running from the mailbox like I was carrying the world's greatest prize. That thick cream-colored envelope pressed tight against my chest like it might vanish if I let go. I burst into our house and shouted, "Dad, I got in." My voice echoed as I made my way to his study, the heart of his empire. The room smelled of old leather and polished wood, with late sunlight slicing across shelves of military plaques and books, each one a monument to his name. There he was, behind his huge mahogany desk, a half-empty glass of bourbon sweating on a coaster. I held out the letter with both hands, my heart pounding, praying for just a spark of pride in his eyes. He took it, skimmed the words, and looked up at me, his face hard as stone. "Good," he said, the words sharp and flat like I'd just checked off some basic chore. "What's the major? Law? Business? You'll need a real degree for officer candidate school." I swallowed hard, digging for courage I didn't know I'd need so soon. "Actually, I'm going to enlist first," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a lie. "I want to serve, like you." The air changed in an instant. What little warmth was there drained from his face, his eyes turning to steel. He set his glass down with a thud that made me jump. "Foolish," he snapped, the word cutting through me. "I served so you wouldn't have to. I didn't raise you to waste your life as an enlisted grunt. I can still go to college after," I said, my voice shaking. "The GI Bill—" He cut me off with a flick of his hand, like I was nothing but a bug. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a leather checkbook. "This," he said, his voice cold as ice, "is your college fund. Your mother and I saved it since you were born. For a future officer, a lawyer, someone with status." His eyes locked onto mine. Not for someone throwing her life away. I held my breath as he uncapped his pen, scribbled a number, and before I could even glimpse it, he tore the check into 4 neat pieces. The sound of ripping paper was like a gunshot, final and deafening. Those white scraps fluttered to the floor like dead leaves, and with them went every hope I had that he'd ever see me for me. I looked to my mom, standing silent in the doorway, watching it all. For one desperate second, our eyes met, and I begged her without words to say something, anything, to tell him I wasn't nothing. But she just gave a small, sad shake of her head and looked away. That night, I packed a single duffel bag. No tears, no goodbyes. I walked out of that house for the last time, knowing the family I thought I had died the moment those scraps hit the floor. That first year in the Army was a fight all its own, not because of the endless drills or the bone-deep exhaustion, but because of the whispers. I stepped off the bus at basic training, my boots crunching into wet gravel, and before my name even hit the air, I heard it. "She's Colonel Quinn's daughter." It spread fast like a spark in dry grass, passed between recruits who didn't know me from Adam. To them, I wasn't Harper. I was just some spoiled kid riding on her dad's shiny reputation, destined for an easy ride. But there was no easy ride. If anything, being his daughter made it tougher. Every time I tripped up or lagged on a ruck march, I felt their eyes, recruits, drill sergeants, all waiting for me to fail. One sergeant, who'd served under my father years back, looked me up and down and sneered, "Don't care who your daddy is, Quinn. Out here, you're nothing till you prove it." So I pushed harder than anyone. I ran until my lungs felt like they'd catch fire, until my muscles screamed and the blisters on my feet bled through my socks. I took on every rotten job nobody wanted, scrubbing latrines, hauling gear in the pouring rain, cleaning the kitchen until my hands were raw. I was hell-bent on proving I wasn't here because of Victor Quinn's name. Nights were the worst. In the quiet of the barracks, when the lights were out and everyone else was snoring, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, second-guessing myself. Had I made a mistake? Was my father right all along? But then I'd trace the scar on my arm, a jagged reminder of a fall during obstacle training, and I'd tell myself, I chose this. This is mine. One night, I found an old, beat-up paperback on my bunk, an anthology of American essays left by some recruit before me. I flipped through it, desperate for something to hold on to, and stumbled on words that hit me like a lifeline. Theodore Roosevelt wrote, "It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood." Those words burned into me. My father was the critic, sitting high and mighty behind his polished desk, judging me from a distance. But I was the one in the arena, covered in mud, blood, and pain. And that was real. After that, I stopped caring if anyone believed in me. I stopped trying to prove anything to him. Every bruise, every blister became my armor. Every night I pushed through doubt and exhaustion, I was forging myself into something tougher, sharper. During our final field exercise, we had to navigate a course that chewed up half the platoon. Some got lost, others just gave up. It was cold, wet, and miserable, with water seeping into my boots. But I kept going, step by step, until I hit the finish line, soaked and shivering, but standing tall. For once, the drill sergeant didn't look at me like I was a disappointment. He just gave me a quick, sharp nod. No words, no fanfare. Just respect. That nod meant more than any grand speech my father ever gave. From that day, I wasn't the colonel's daughter in my own head anymore. I was Sergeant Harper Quinn, and no one was going to take that from me. Even after I earned my stripes and carved out my place among my peers, my father's shadow clung to me like a chain I couldn't shake. Everywhere I went, it followed. I'd step into a new unit, and before I could even introduce myself, I'd hear it. "Quinn?" As in Colonel Victor Quinn? The words carried the same mix of awe and expectation, like I was supposed to be a carbon copy of him, destined to fall short. I couldn't stand walking past the officers' club, where framed photos of him hung in the hallways, his smile frozen in some moment of glory. Every time I saw those pictures, it was like he was right there, staring me down, reminding me I'd never be enough in his eyes. After long days of drills and mountains of paperwork, I'd find myself staring into a cracked bathroom mirror in the barracks. My face was streaked with dirt, my hair matted with sweat, bruises aching under the harsh fluorescent lights. I didn't look anything like him. But no matter how hard I worked, how many miles I ran, how many nights I pushed through pain, people still saw me as his daughter, like that was all I'd ever be. The whispers never stopped. "She's only here because of him." Bet her dad pulled strings. They didn't see the 4 a.m. runs, my knees screaming, or the moments I swallowed tears in the dark when no one was around. All they saw was the name stitched on my chest, Quinn. What hurt most wasn't just their words. It was knowing my father thought the same. To him, I was still the kid who turned down West Point, who threw away her potential to slog it out as an enlisted soldier. He couldn't see that every grueling day, every scar I earned was proof I wasn't weak. I was building something real, something that wasn't handed to me. I used to dream of standing in front of him, not as his kid, but as someone who'd forged her own way, scars and all. But that moment never came. At military events, there he'd be, and I'd feel like that 18-year-old again, holding a torn-up college fund check, my future in pieces. The worst part? A piece of me still craved his approval. I hated that part of myself. My chest would tighten watching him shake hands with generals, and for a fleeting second, I'd wonder if he could ever be proud of me. Then I'd see that smirk, that look of disdain, like I was something broken he needed to fix. So I made up my mind. If I couldn't step out of his shadow, I'd burn it to the ground. I'd become so strong, so undeniably real that even he would have to see me for who I was. And if he wouldn't, I'd tear down everything he'd built to show the world that the name Quinn didn't belong to him alone. That day at the Fort Liberty firing range, I lowered my M4 and locked eyes with my father, and something inside me broke loose. It wasn't just his words cutting me down, or the faint snickers I caught from my own soldiers. It was a cold, hard truth that hit me square in the chest. I'd never win his respect. Not by standing taller, not by pushing through pain, not by giving up every piece of myself to prove I was enough. For years, I'd thought if I just worked harder, bled more, I could drown out that voice of his. The one that said I'd always fall short. But standing there, with his venom still hanging in the air, I realized I didn't need his respect. I didn't need his nod of approval. What I needed was to stop letting his lies tell me who I was. Those whispers on the range weren't just about me. They were about him. There was something ugly in the way he carried himself like some untouchable king, acting like the army owed him everything while he sold out his honor for profit behind closed doors. I'd heard the rumors, bits and pieces about shady contracts, consulting deals that didn't add up. I'd brushed them off, too scared to believe. But that day, with the North Carolina heat pressing down like a heavy blanket and sweat stinging my eyes, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Staying quiet, keeping my head down, that would make me exactly what he said I was. Nothing. Right there, with the weight of his sneer on me, I made a vow to myself. I'd uncover the truth. I'd tear through every corner of his empire, every lie he'd spun, every life he'd traded for his own gain. And when I had it all laid bare, I wouldn't just face him. I'd bring him down. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the soldiers he'd betrayed, the men who trusted him, the ones who might already be paying for his greed. I glanced at him one last time that day, his smirk still twisting his face. And I smiled back. Not out of forgiveness, but because I knew something he didn't. He just made me stronger. That was the last day I stood in his shadow. From that moment on, I was done playing his game. And I was ready to show him just how much damage a grunt like me could do. I wasn't even supposed to be at the Patriot ceremony that night. The annual event on base was a big deal, meant to honor veterans and active duty soldiers, but really it was a stage for politics and polished egos. My father, Victor Quinn, lived for it. My unit was there for the color guard, and I planned to keep my head down, avoiding another scene like the firing range. But the second I saw him across the lobby, decked out in his pristine retired colonel's uniform, my stomach knotted up. He was holding court with a gaggle of high-ranking officers and civilian contractors, his deep laugh booming like he owned the place. Then his eyes found me, and that laugh cut off. That smirk of his crept up, the one that made my skin crawl. "Well, look who it is," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby. "My Grunt daughter. Did they sneak you in the back door, Harper? Or do they let just anyone in here now?" The officers around him gave polite chuckles, but I caught their uneasy glances. My face burned, and for a heartbeat, I thought about turning and walking away. But I didn't. I squared my shoulders and held his gaze. Before I could say a word, the room went quiet. Every head turned as General Grant Ellison walked in. 4 stars on his shoulder, the kind of man who didn't need to shout to command respect. My father straightened up, adjusting his uniform, stepping forward with his hand out, ready to bask in the general's attention. But Ellison didn't even glance at him. He walked right past my father like he wasn't there, his sharp eyes locking onto me. "Sergeant First Class Harper Quinn," he said, his voice steady and warm. He offered his hand, and for a moment I froze, wondering if this was really happening. "I read your after-action report from the Green River operation. Outstanding work. That kind of tactical clarity is rare." I saw my father's face go rigid, his jaw tightening as Ellison ignored him completely. I shook the general's hand, a rush of pride and something new. Validation, warming my chest in a way I'd never felt from Victor. "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice holding steady despite the storm inside me. Ellison nodded. "Keep it up, Sergeant. We need more soldiers like you." And just like that, he moved on, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. I didn't need to look at my father to feel his fury. The man who always owned the room had just been eclipsed by the daughter he called a failure. "Don't get used to it," he muttered as the crowd started buzzing again, his voice low and bitter. "People like Ellison say that stuff to look good. It doesn't mean a thing." But I knew better. That moment meant everything. For the first time in years, someone saw me. Not as Victor Quinn's wayward kid, but as Harper Quinn, a soldier who'd earned her place. Walking out of the ceremony that night, I kept replaying it in my head, a smile tugging at my lips. I knew the fight with my father was far from over, but I'd just seen the first crack in his armor, and that was enough to keep me going. 2 weeks after the Patriot ceremony, I was holed up in my barracks at Fort Liberty when an email pinged my inbox. I figured it was another generic newsletter, the kind we all ignore. But the subject line stopped me dead. Invitation to interview. Joint Special Operations University. JSOU. My hands shook as I clicked it open, the words swimming for a second before they snapped into focus. I'd been recommended for an instructor spot at JSOU, one of the most elite training hubs in the U.S. military, a place where strategy and grit turn soldiers into legends. My heart thumped hard. Me? The kid my father once called grunt trash? This wasn't just a job. It was a shot at a life beyond Victor Quinn's shadow. I called Master Sergeant Blake Turner, a guy I knew who worked tight with JSOU. His voice came through warm and steady. "Harper, you earned this. Your name was at the top of the candidate list. Those after-action reports of yours are gold, and that Green River analysis? Folks are still buzzing about it." Hearing that felt like a dream. Like for once I wasn't being judged by my last name or held up to someone else's measure. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay there, staring at the barracks ceiling, picturing a new life in Florida. Palm trees, bright classrooms, a chance to build something that was mine, far from the weight of my father's world. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one holding the wheel, not just clinging to the rigging in his storm. I threw myself into prepping for that interview like it was the only thing that mattered. I pored over case studies, sharpened my analysis frameworks, and even ran mock sessions with a couple of NCOs I trusted. "You're a natural for this," one of my squad leaders said. "You've got the experience, the grit. They'd be crazy not to pick you." But there was this nagging voice in the back of my head. My father didn't like losing his grip on things, especially not on me. If he caught wind I was climbing the ladder in a way he couldn't claim credit for, he'd take it as a slap in the face. And Victor Quinn didn't let slights slide. I thought about telling my mom, but stopped short. She'd either try to smooth things over with him or, worse, tip him off. I couldn't take that chance. This was my victory, and I was keeping it close until I had that job locked down. One evening, I wandered out to the parade field as the sun sank low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink. I whispered to myself, "This is it, Harper. This is your shot to show the world who you are, not just his name." What I didn't know then was that this chance, this first real taste of freedom, was about to become the very thing my father would try to use to crush me again. 3 days before my JSOU interview, an email hit my inbox like a punch to the gut. "We regret to inform you that the interview process for your application has been concluded. Your candidacy has been withdrawn." I stared at the screen, my eyes burning, certain I'd read it wrong. Concluded? Withdrawn? It didn't add up. I'd prepped for weeks, my record was clean, and Blake Turner had all but said I was their top pick. I called Blake right away, fighting to keep my voice steady. "There's a mistake," I said. "I just got an email saying I'm out." He went quiet for a moment, then let out a heavy sigh. "Harper, I was about to call. Someone flagged your file. It came from higher up." "Higher up?" My stomach dropped. "Who?" Another pause. "A retired colonel called in a personal recommendation against you. Said you had psychological instability after a mission in Kandahar. Claimed you weren't fit to train special operations candidates." The air left my lungs. "Victor," I whispered. I didn't need to guess. Only my father would sink so low, smearing me as unstable just to keep me in his shadow. "Harper, I fought for you," Blake said, frustration in his voice. But when a guy with that kind of clout throws around mental health concerns, the board listens. They'd rather drop a good candidate than take a chance. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. In one phone call, my father had crushed the one thing I wanted most: a life free of his control. That night, I drove to my mom's house, desperate for some kind of comfort or explanation. She opened the door with that soft smile of hers, but I saw the guilt in her eyes before I even spoke. "He called you, didn't he?" I asked, stepping inside. She looked away, saying nothing at first. Then, quietly, "Harper, your father, he just wants what's best. He thinks the military's tough enough without you being in the spotlight. Best for me?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Ruining my career before it even starts? That's his version of love?" "Harper, he's scared you'll get hurt." "Stop." My voice cut through hers, sharp and final. "The only one hurting me is him." I walked out before she could say another word. Driving back to base, a cold, heavy fury settled in my chest. It wasn't just at him. It was at myself for letting him still have this hold over me. Lying in my bunk that night, staring at the dark ceiling, I made a decision. He wanted to break me? He'd have to try a lot harder than that. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay there, staring at the faint glow of the barracks ceiling, my mind churning like a hurricane. Victor Quinn had slammed another door shut on me, but this time, I wasn't walking away. He'd stolen enough. My future, my peace, any chance at a real father-daughter bond. Now he was trying to wipe out the career I'd fought tooth and nail for. I reached under my bed and grabbed my notebook, the one I kept just for me, not for mission logs or reports. I flipped to a fresh page and scrawled Victor at the top. Below it, I started jotting down every dirty rumor I'd ever heard about him. Shady contracts. Soldiers he'd pushed through who didn't deserve it. Whispers about cash flowing through consulting firms tied to his name. One name hit me like a warning shot. Lieutenant Preston Hale. I remembered him from a joint training rotation. Sloppy, cocky, nowhere near good enough. Yet somehow he'd been fast-tracked into a top-tier special operations team. Back then, I figured he had connections. Now, I couldn't help but wonder if those connections led straight to my father. I dug deeper, pulling up old training reports from the database. Hale's file was a mess. Notes about his weak leadership, his inability to handle pressure. He'd nearly flunked out of selection. But then, out of nowhere, his final evaluation was glowing, like he'd turned into a model soldier overnight. I cross-checked dates and found something that made my blood run cold. A contract from Quinn Strategic Solutions, my father's firm, signed right around the time of Hale's miracle turnaround. Money had moved, and suddenly Hale was wearing a patch he hadn't earned. Rage boiled in my chest, but beneath it was something sharper. Clarity, cold and unyielding. This wasn't just about my career anymore. This was about lives. Soldiers relied on leaders like Hale in the field. One wrong call from someone unfit could mean men didn't come home. I started piecing together a dossier, keeping it quiet. Copies of reports, inconsistencies, screenshots of payment records that hinted at something bigger. Each scrap was a piece of a puzzle, and the picture it formed was uglier than I'd ever imagined. 2 days later, I overheard a couple of NCOs in the motor pool talking about a mission gone bad overseas. 2 soldiers dead because someone botched the orders. Hale's name came up, tied to the screw-up. My stomach twisted. That night, I sat on my bunk, staring at Hale's file on my laptop. If Victor's behind this, I whispered to myself, he's not just a liar. He's dangerous. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I'd spent years trying to step out of his shadow, but this wasn't about proving myself now. It was about the truth, no matter what it cost me. I closed my notebook, my hands steady as I wrote one final line in bold. Step 1, follow the money. Step 2, bring down Victor Quinn. I couldn't shake Lieutenant Preston Hale's name from my head. From the first time we crossed paths in training, something about him felt off. He had the look. Square jaw, shiny boots, a slick smile. But he couldn't lead a squad out of a wet paper bag. Late one night in the operations office, I pulled his training records, my pulse hammering as I scrolled through the files. His early evaluations were just as I remembered. Awful. Instructors had red flagged him. Lacks adaptability under pressure. Can't finish navigation drills on time. Weak tactical awareness. Then, out of nowhere, the tone flipped. In just weeks, Hale went from unfit for command to highly recommended for elite placement. It was too clean, too sudden. Nobody turns it around like that without a push. I kept digging, matching training dates with financial records. It wasn't easy, but I knew where to look. There it was. A contract payment from my father's firm, Quinn Strategic Solutions, timed perfectly with Hale's transformation. Not a bonus, a payoff. My hands gripped the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just favoritism. This was corruption, plain and simple. My father was using his clout to shove unqualified men into leadership roles, and it was only a matter of time before someone paid the price. Then I found the mission report that hit me like a knife to the gut. Hale's first overseas deployment, a recon mission that went to hell. 2 names on the casualty list burned into me. Sergeant Noah Kincaid and Sergeant First Class Miguel Alvarez. Noah was like a little brother back in advanced training, always cracking jokes, lifting spirits when the days dragged on forever. Miguel was a rock, one of the toughest NCOs I knew, earning respect without ever raising his voice. Both gone because Hale led them into an ambush he should have seen coming. I read the report 3 times, each word tightening the knot in my stomach. The signs were there. Intel on enemy movement, signals Hale ignored. He charged in like it was a game, and it cost 2 good men their lives, leaving a unit limping back to base. I felt sick. This wasn't just a bad leader slipping through. This was blood on my father's hands. If he hadn't pulled strings for Hale, Noah and Miguel would still be here. I sat there staring at their names on the screen. Kincaid, Alvarez. I whispered them like a vow, like I owed them something. The rage inside me was new, sharper than anything I'd felt before. It wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about me, too, for not seeing it sooner. I'd let him call me weak, a failure, while he built a house of lies that got soldiers killed. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote their names at the top of a fresh page. Below them, I scrawled, "This is for them." I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing. I was going to bring Victor down. And I'd start by uncovering just how far this rot spread. 2 days after piecing together the truth about Hale, I knew I was in over my head. Victor Quinn wasn't just a retired colonel with a few buddies in high places. He'd built a shadow empire, a web of influence that could crush me with one call. If I was going to take him down, I needed someone who could match his game. That's when I found Major Dana Morales. Her name caught my eye in a low-key CID report that landed on my desk. It wasn't flagged as urgent, but the words irregularities in training certifications and Financial discrepancies tied to former contractors jumped out. I traced the report back to her signature. I reached out, and we set up a meeting at a quiet coffee shop off base, the kind of place where nobody notices who comes or goes. Morales walked in wearing civvies, her posture sharp, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She scanned the room, then spotted me and slid into the booth across from me. "Sergeant Quinn?" she said, her voice steady but not cold. "Didn't expect your call." "Didn't expect to make it," I said, my hands gripping my coffee mug a little too tight. "But I think we're after the same ghost." Her eyes narrowed. "Victor Quinn?" Hearing his name from her lips sent a shiver through me. I nodded. "I've got evidence. Money trails, fake evaluations. I think it got 2 soldiers killed." Morales leaned in, her gaze sharp as a blade. "We've been tracking him for months. He's slick, uses front companies, pawns who don't even know they're part of it. I suspect he's running a pay-to-pass scheme for special ops candidates." I slid a folder across the table. Hale's records, payment dates, the after-action report on Kincaid and Alvarez. She flipped through it, her brow creasing deeper with every page. "This is good," she said, looking up. "It lines up with our suspicions, but with your access and your name, you know what you're risking?" "I know," I said, my voice low. "If he finds out I'm in this, he'll ruin me." Her eyes softened, just a flicker. "He's still your father." I let out a bitter laugh. "He hasn't been my father in a long time." We sat there, the coffee shop's hum filling the quiet. Then she tapped the folder with one finger. "If you're in, we need a case that's bulletproof. No hearsay, no guesses. Hard proof. Bank records, witnesses, recordings. Once we start, there's no turning back." Her words hit heavy, but I didn't waver. "I'm in, whatever it takes." She studied me like she was weighing whether I could handle the storm ahead. Then she nodded. "All right, Sergeant Quinn, you're not just in the fight now. You're stepping into a war." Walking out of that coffee shop, the late afternoon sun stretching shadows across the pavement, I felt a clarity I hadn't known in weeks. This wasn't just about settling a score anymore. It was about justice. For Kincaid, for Alvarez, for every soldier betrayed by the system Victor corrupted. Logan Pierce was once the one person I thought I could count on. We met years back when I was still clawing my way through the Army, trying to make a name that wasn't tied to my father. Logan was a young attorney for a defense contractor, sharp as a blade and charming in that way only someone who knows they're smart can pull off. I fell hard, fast. He didn't see me as Colonel Quinn's daughter. He saw Harper, or so I thought. Late nights, we'd talk about our dreams, the lives we wanted. He said he admired my grit, my refusal to coast on my father's name. I believed we were on the same side. I was dead wrong. As Major Morales and I pieced together Victor's dirty operations, one name kept surfacing in the paperwork for Quinn Strategic Solutions: Logan Pierce. Every time I saw it, my stomach twisted. At first, I told myself it was a fluke. Logan worked in corporate law. Maybe he'd just crossed paths with my father's firms, but the deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Logan wasn't just near Victor. He was in his pocket. I found a legal memo with his signature, outlining how to bury complaints about training fraud under layers of non-disclosure agreements. He'd even advised Victor on hiding consulting payments from scrutiny. My blood boiled. I called him that night, my voice shaking with rage. "How long have you been covering for him?" I demanded. A pause, then his voice came through, cool and calculated, like he was already in a courtroom. "Harper, you don't get how this works. Your father has powerful friends. This isn't a fight you can win." "You knew," I snapped. "You knew about the money, about the soldiers who died because of the clowns he pushed through. And you said nothing." "It's not that simple," he said, a faint crack of guilt in his tone. "I tried to keep it clean, make sure nothing illegal could stick to him. But you need to think about your future. Don't throw it all away on a battle you'll lose." His words stung like a backhand. My future? I'd fought for every scrap of my career while he was cashing checks to keep men like Victor untouchable. I trusted you, I said, my voice ice cold. But you're just like him. Harper, please. I hung up before he could finish. My hands shook, not with grief, but with fury. If Victor's empire was built on lies, Logan was one of the builders. And now I wasn't sure if anything we'd had was ever real. Later that night, Morales called after going through more documents. Your boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, I cut in. He's not just a lawyer for your father's companies. He's been running the financial shell game that keeps Victor clean. If we can get him on record talking about it, we can tie this whole thing together. A part of me flinched at the idea of using someone I'd once loved as a pawn. But the soldier in me, the woman who'd watched brothers like Kincaid and Alvarez go into the ground because of corruption, knew what had to be done. I took a deep breath and said, if Logan Pierce is in my way, he's just another piece of this rod I'm going to cut out. The night I saw Logan's betrayal for what it was, something in me turned to steel. I sat in my quarters, staring at my notebook with Kincaid and Alvarez's names etched at the top, and a fire lit inside me. Stronger, fiercer than anything I'd felt before. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about every soldier who'd paid for his greed, every truth buried under his polished lies and shiny medals. I called Major Dana Morales. I'm done playing defense, I said, my voice steady. It's time to hit back. Morales didn't hesitate. She brought me to her CID office, a cramped room that smelled of stale coffee and tension. Her desk was a mess of files and charts, mapping out Victor's web, shell companies, shady contracts, fake evaluations. It looked like a spider's lair, with Victor Quinn at the heart, pulling every string. To take him down, Morales said, we need evidence that sticks. Not whispers, not hints. His voice, his signature, something that nails him to these payoffs. I nodded. Then let's get it. We built a timeline of every dirty contract linked to Quinn Strategic Solutions. Morales had access to intel I couldn't have touched. DoD flagged transactions, reports of questionable promotions in elite units. Together, we connected the dots. Preston Hale wasn't alone. At least 3 other officers had climbed the ranks after their families donated to Victor's firm. My chest tightened, thinking of how many lives were at risk because of those rigged promotions. We can't wait for more soldiers to die, I said, my voice low but firm. Morales gave me a sharp look. Then we play smart. You're too close to this, Harper. Push too hard, you'll tip him off and he'll bury us both. I took a deep breath, forcing the daughter in me to step back and let the soldier take over. So we set a trap. The plan was simple but risky. I'd approach Victor, pretending I wanted to reconcile, to learn from his business savvy now that my career had stalled. In truth, I'd be wired up, with Morales listening from a safe spot, ready to catch anything damning. The days before the meeting, sleep was a stranger. Memories of Victor's smirks, his sabotage of my JSOU shot, his turning Logan against me. They all came flooding back. But this time, I wasn't backing down. The night before, I sat alone, flipping through old photos of Kincaid and Alvarez. One was from a base barbecue, all of us laughing over burnt burgers and flat soda. They were gone because of a man who cared only about his own name. I'll get justice for you, I whispered, my hand on the faded photo. I promise. Morning came and I dressed carefully. Civvies, nothing to make Victor suspicious. Morales handed me the tiny recording device. Once this starts, she warned, there's no turning back. If he smells a rat, you're alone until I can get a warrant. I met her eyes. I'm ready. Driving to the sleek high-rise where Victor ran his consulting empire, a calm settled over me. This was it. The moment I stopped being the girl he could break. I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his reckoning. The day I walked back into Victor Quinn's world, the air outside his Raleigh high-rise felt thick, like the sky was holding its breath. His consulting empire sat on the top floor, all glass and steel, gleaming like it owned the sun itself. To everyone else, Victor was a war hero turned master strategist. To me, he was a vulture, clinging to power he didn't deserve. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt endless, each floor's chime hammering in my chest. Morales' warning looped in my head. Stay calm. Don't let him see you're angry. Let him talk. Let him bury himself. The receptionist glanced up as I stepped into the lobby. Miss Quinn? She said, polite but practiced, like she'd been told I was coming. Victor's name was everywhere. Plaques, awards, his legacy carved into every inch of this place. I forced a smile. Yeah, here to see him. He was already standing when I walked into his office, hands behind his back, framed by a wall of medals and photos of him grinning with generals. His eyes sized me up like I was some stranger crashing his party. Well, this is a surprise, he said, his voice smooth but sharp. Wondered how long it'd take you to come crawling back after that JSOU mess. I swallowed hard, keeping my tone steady. I'm not here to fight, Dad. I want to learn. His brows shot up, suspicion flickering. Learn what? How to win, I said. You've built something big. Maybe I was wrong to push against you. Maybe I need to know how you did it. He studied me, his face easing just a fraction. Finally figured out I've been right this whole time? I nodded, choking down the lie. Maybe I've been too stubborn. I want to understand how you turned this, I waved at his sleek office, into something that commands respect. Victor chuckled, strolling to the bar cart in the corner and pouring himself a whiskey. Respect's not the game, Harper. It's leverage. People respect who they're afraid to lose. I shifted slightly, nudging the pen in my pocket, the one Morales rigged with a recorder. Every word he spoke was being caught. I needed him to slip, to gloat, to spill the truth about the deals he'd made and the lives they'd cost. I leaned in, playing curious. Like Preston Hale? Heard his career took off after you. Mentored him. Victor smirked, swirling his drink. Mentor's a nice word. Let's just say his family knew the value of a smart investment. My pulse jumped, but I kept my face blank. You mean money? Money influence? Call it what you want, he said, taking a sip. The Army's a machine, Harper. Feed it what it needs, and it gives you what you want. I showed Hale how to play. Not my fault if some weaklings couldn't handle his leadership. Weaklings. My blood roared, but I stayed cool. So you don't regret it? Even if men died because of him? He set his glass down, eyes locking onto mine. Regret? That's for losers. I win, Harper. That's the difference between you and me. That was it. His arrogance handed me everything. He'd confessed, clear as day. I stood, hiding the shake in my hands. Thanks, I said quietly, for being honest. He tilted his head, puzzled. Sounds like you're saying goodbye. I gave him a tight, cold smile. Maybe I am. Walking out, my heart thundered with fear and victory. The pen in my pocket held his confession. Morales was waiting in an unmarked car outside, headset on. I handed her the pen, and she gave me a rare nod of approval. This, she said, holding it like it was dynamite, is enough to start a fire. Now we get ready for the gala. The Patriots' gala felt like walking into a lion's den. The officers' club glowed with warm light, flags draped elegantly, crystal chandeliers sparkling over polished mahogany floors. It was a room built to celebrate honor and legacy, but tonight, it was where a liar would face his reckoning. I got there early, wearing a simple black dress and heels, hair pulled back tight. No uniform tonight. I didn't want Victor to see me as Sergeant Harper Quinn. I wanted him to see the storm he couldn't stop. Morales and her team were already in place, blending into the crowd in their evening wear, earpieces tucked behind curls or suit collars. The room hummed with chatter. Generals, retired officers, political bigwigs mixing like it was a high-stakes chess game. I spotted Senator Caldwell by the bar, flashing his practiced smile, the same guy who'd called Victor a beacon of integrity, more times than I could stomach. When Victor walked in, the air shifted. Conversations paused, heads turned, everyone drawn to him like moths to a flame. He wore a sharp suit, red tie screaming confidence, my mother, Margot, at his side. Beautiful but brittle, like she'd learned to hold herself together under his weight. He worked the room, shaking hands, laughing, owning every inch of it. Then his eyes found me, and for a split second, his smug grin faltered. He raised his glass in a mock toast, daring me to make a move. The ceremony kicked off with a string quartet playing softly. The MC, a retired general with a voice like thunder, took the stage. Tonight we honor a man whose service, on and off the battlefield, has inspired generations. Please join me in recognizing Colonel Victor Quinn with the Lifetime Integrity and Honor Award. The crowd roared, cameras flashing as Victor strode up, calm and proud, accepting the glass award with both hands, letting it catch the light. He scanned the room like a king sizing up his court. "Integrity and honor," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "Those words have shaped my life. Leadership is about guiding with strength, wisdom, and excellence. I'm humbled tonight, but the real honor belongs to the soldiers who risk everything for freedom." They ate it up, clapping like he was a saint. But I knew the truth, and I was done letting him hide behind it. I waited for the applause to fade, then stepped forward, my heels clicking sharp against the floor. The crowd's eyes followed me, whispers stirring like a breeze. Victor's face tightened as I neared the stage. "Harper," he said, low and tense. "This isn't the time." "Wrong, Dad," I said, my smile cold. "It's the perfect time." I pulled a small remote from my clutch, linked to a speaker Morales had hidden earlier. "You love talking about honor," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Let's hear what it sounds like when you think no one's listening." I pressed the button, and Victor's voice filled the air, clear and damning from our meeting days before. "Money, influence, call it whatever you want. The Army's a machine. You feed it what it wants, and it gives you what you want. It's not my fault if some weaklings didn't survive his leadership." A collective gasp swept the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Senator Caldwell went white as a sheet. Victor stood frozen, his jaw clenched, gripping the award like he might break it. For the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. For a heartbeat, the ballroom was a statue gallery, everyone frozen as Victor's damning words echoed through the speakers. The air shifted, admiration crumbling into confusion, then suspicion. Cameras that had been snapping his glory now turned on him like spotlights. Victor bounced back fast. He set his award down with a sharp clink and stepped toward me, his voice low and venomous. "What do you think you're doing, Harper?" "Showing them the real you," I said, calm as stone, the remote steady in my hand. He forced a laugh, but his eyes were cold. "This is absurd. Words twisted out of context can make anyone look bad. My daughter," he turned to the crowd, "likes to make a scene. She's upset because I tried to save her career, right, Harper?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Eyes pinned me, some doubting, others curious. My mother stood there, caught between us, her face pale like she was watching a disaster unfold. "You didn't save me," I said, my voice slicing through the whispers. "You sabotaged me, and you did worse to others." I nodded to Morales, who stepped forward with a folder thick with evidence. "I've got reports," I said. "Financial records, contracts from Quinn Strategic Solutions, all tied to unqualified candidates who bought their way into elite roles. 2 soldiers are dead because of your greed. Kincaid, Alvarez. Say their names." The room went dead silent. The MC shifted, unsure, glancing between Victor and me. I saw Victor's jaw twitch, anger flaring in his eyes. "You're clueless," he snapped. "The Army's not some fairy tale institution. It's politics, strategy. You're naive to think otherwise." "Naive?" I stepped closer, my voice like iron. "I've seen the blood, Dad. I've watched good men die while you play God from your office." He turned to the crowd, voice booming. "She's unstable. She's been under psych review for years. That's why JSOU passed on her. She's not fit to lead. I saw that coming. Funny, I said, pulling a USB drive from my clutch. This has the email logs where you told Logan Pierce to fake my mental health record. Want me to play that one too? Gasps echoed again. Senator Caldwell tugged at his tie, looking like he wanted to bolt. Before Victor could answer, a voice cut through like a blade. Enough. General Grant Ellison strode forward, parting the crowd like a storm. His 4 stars gleamed under the chandeliers. He stopped between us, his eyes hard. This isn't just a family spat, he said. He looked at me. Sergeant Quinn, are your claims backed up? Yes, sir, I said, standing taller. Every word. He turned to Victor, his face like granite. Colonel Quinn, I've heard rumors for months. Tonight I heard proof. You're coming with us. Victor's face flushed red. You can't do this. I'm a decorated officer. I built... Lies. Ellison cut in. He nodded to Morales, who moved in with 2 CID agents. Victor scanned the room, searching for an ally. Nobody budged. Even my mother stood still, hands shaking. As the cuffs clicked around Victor's wrists, his eyes burned into mine. You think you've won, Harper? This isn't over. I held his gaze, steady as a rock. No, Dad. It's just getting started. The ballroom went dead quiet the second those cuffs snapped around Victor's wrists. It was like the world held its breath. The man who'd spent decades owning every room, cowing soldiers and spinning stories stood exposed, his empire of lies shattered by his own arrogance. My mother, Margot, let out a soft gasp, her trembling hand reaching for him. But Victor didn't even glance her way. His eyes stayed locked on mine, blazing with rage, disbelief, and something new. Fear. I'd never seen him scared before. Harper, you don't know what you've done, he hissed as Morales and the CID agents led him off the stage. You've ruined everything. This family, this name. I stepped closer, my voice steady as steel. No, Dad. You ruined this family when you picked power over honor. All I did was let the truth out. Senator Caldwell tried to slink off, but General Ellison's voice cracked like a whip. Senator, we need to talk about your ties to Quinn's companies. Caldwell froze, pale as a ghost, while reporters started snapping photos and whispering into recorders. I looked out at the crowd and saw my mom staring at me, her face a mix of pain and confusion. I walked over, my steps slow. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I know this hurts, but it had to be done. Tears glistened in her eyes. He wasn't always like this, she whispered. There was a time he believed in what was right. I know, I said, my throat tight, but that time's gone. If I didn't stop him, more men like Kincaid and Alvarez would have paid for it. She turned away, her shoulders shaking, and I knew then that tonight wasn't just the end of Victor's empire. It was the end of whatever broken family we had left. Outside, police lights flashed red and blue against the night. Victor was shoved into a black SUV, still yelling about conspiracies and betrayal. I watched from the club's steps, arms crossed, my heart heavy but sure. Morales came up beside me. You did it, she said, her voice laced with respect and weariness. Most would have looked the other way. You didn't? I nodded, the wind feeling more bitter than sweet. I had to. For Kincaid, for Alvarez, for every soldier he played like pawns. General Ellison joined us, his presence as steady as ever under the dark sky. He put a hand on my shoulder. You showed real courage tonight, Sergeant Quinn. The kind that doesn't just win fights. It changes the game. Thank you, sir, I said, my voice soft but firm. As the last SUV pulled away, I stood there alone for a moment, breathing in the cool air. The weight of my father's shadow, the one I'd fought my whole life to escape, was gone. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo of Kincaid and Alvarez, their smiles frozen from that barbecue years ago. It's done, I whispered. The first step of justice is done. Then I turned back to the ballroom where the crowd was still buzzing with shock. No more fading into the shadows for me. Tonight wasn't just about taking Victor down, it was about claiming my name back. I walked over to Morales and Ellison, standing tall. "This is just the start," I told them. "Victor's gone, but the mess he left? We're burning it all down." And for the first time in years, I felt free. The morning after the Patriots Gala, I woke up to my father's name plastered everywhere. Every news channel screamed the same thing: decorated colonel arrested in corruption scandal. Another headline hit harder: military hero or mastermind of fraud. My whole life, Victor Quinn was a giant, cloaked in this unbreakable armor of respect and power. But now that armor was shattered, and what spilled out was raw and ugly. I sat in the base's break room, clutching a coffee I couldn't stomach. The TV looped footage of my father, hands cuffed, being marched out of the gala. That proud, commanding stride of his was gone, replaced by this stiff, angry shuffle. His face, once so full of fire, looked small, like a balloon finally running out of air. I couldn't look away, but it hurt to watch. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts poured in from soldiers I trained with. Old friends, even folks who used to call me just Colonel Quinn's daughter. Now they were shocked, some even proud. "You were right all along," one said. "It took real courage to face him," another wrote. "Harper, what you did last night, that's history." I let most of them go unanswered. A hero? I didn't feel like one. I felt like I was standing in the ruins of a family I'd lost long ago. That afternoon, Morales called. "The investigation's moving fast," she said. "Victor's facing charges: fraud, obstruction, even negligence tied to lives lost. There's enough to lock him up for years, maybe decades." I should have felt triumphant, but instead, there was this ache in my chest, part grief, part relief. "What about my mom?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's cooperating," Morales said. "Her name's tied to some shell companies, but she didn't know the full story. It'll take time to figure out her role." I sighed. My mom lived in Victor's shadow, just like I had. I hoped one day she'd see why I had to do this. 2 weeks later, I got a call to General Grant Ellison's office. I wasn't expecting it. The man who'd shaken my hand over Victor's at the gala sat behind a desk covered in awards and old military photos. His presence filled the room. "Sergeant Quinn," he said, waving me to a chair. "You've had quite a month." I managed a small smile. "That's one way to put it, sir." I sat up straight, maybe too straight. He looked at me with those sharp eyes of his. "What you did at the gala wasn't just brave. It was necessary. The Army needs people like you who'll speak the truth, even when it's messy." I swallowed hard, his words hitting deep. "Thank you, sir," I said. He leaned forward. "I talked to the folks at JSOU. They know what happened to your file. If you want it, there's an instructor spot waiting. You'd be shaping the next generation of special ops." I couldn't speak for a moment. JSOU, the dream my father tried to bury, was mine again. Not because of him, but because of me. "Yes, sir," I said, voice steady. "I'd be honored." He gave a small nod, a hint of a smile. "You earned it, Quinn. Not because of your name, but because of who you are." That night, I drove to a quiet spot near the base, where the horizon stretched wide, painted gold and orange by the sunset. I thought about everything. Every battle I'd fought, not just out there, but inside. For years, I thought my worth depended on my father's approval. Every harsh word, every door he slammed, I carried like a scar. But watching his world fall apart, I realized I never needed his approval. I never had. I thought of Kincaid and Alvarez, the promises I made to them in my heart. "We did it," I whispered into the breeze. "The truth's out." A few days later, I got my official JSOU letter. I held it, reading it over and over like it might vanish. It wasn't the title or the prestige. It was knowing I'd earned it, on my terms. Morales called to congratulate me. "Quinn," she said, Most people would have stayed quiet, scared of a man like Victor. But you tore his walls down. I smiled a little. Yeah, I said. I guess I did. For the first time, my father's shadow was gone. I felt free, and I was ready to build something new, something true, something mine. The first time I stepped through the gates of JSOU as an instructor, it felt like I was walking into a new chapter of my life. The Florida morning wrapped me in a warm breeze, nothing like the heavy heat of North Carolina. This air felt lighter, like it was carrying some of my burdens away. As I passed the training grounds, I noticed a few students glancing my way, whispering my name. Not because I was Victor Quinn's daughter, but because I'd stood up for what was right. That felt good. Real good. My first day in the classroom had my nerves on edge. Those young candidates stared up at me, their eyes full of fire and dreams of proving themselves. I took a deep breath and started with one line that made them sit up a little straighter. Leadership isn't about the stars on your shoulder. It's about the weight you carry for the folks who trust you. For years, I'd chased my father's approval, hoping he'd see me as worthy. But standing there, I realized real honor isn't handed out by someone like Victor or carved into a plaque. It's in moments like this, passing on courage to kids who'll lead with heart and protect every soldier under them. A week later, I drove to the cemetery where Kincaid and Alvarez were laid to rest. The sky was gray, like it knew the weight I was carrying. I brought 2 small flags, one for each of them, and knelt to place them in the earth. I stood there a long time, just quiet. I kept my promise, I finally said, my voice steady. The truth's out now. What happened to you won't be forgotten. I made sure of it. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, and for a moment it was like they were there with me. It wasn't full closure, but it was a step toward peace. My family? That's a tougher story. Victor was still in custody, his trial hanging over us like a storm cloud. His crimes had spilled beyond the military, with news channels picking apart how a decorated officer could fall so far. My brother Ethan called me once, his voice shaky. "Harper, I didn't know it'd go this far," he said. "Dad told me we were protecting our legacy. I didn't know about the lives he destroyed." I didn't have much to give him. "We all make choices," I said softly. "Now we live with them." My mom, Margot, sent me a letter. It wasn't quite an apology, but she wrote she was proud of me for doing what was right. I held that letter for a long time, torn. I love her, but I can't forget the years she stayed quiet. Maybe one day we'll find a way to mend things. 3 months later, I stood at a podium for a small JSOU graduation. My students had made it through, and looking at their faces filled me with pride and hope. When I joined the Army, I told them, I thought strength was about taking every hit. But it's not about never falling. It's about getting back up, even when the people closest to you try to keep you down. Integrity is what you do when no one's watching. That's the leader this world needs. The applause wasn't loud, but it was real. And for the first time, I knew I was right where I belonged. That night, I sat on my porch, the quiet Florida streets stretching out before me. I thought about everything. Victor's betrayal, Logan's lies, the nights I doubted myself. Every step, every scar, had built the path to this freedom. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "The Quinn name isn't his anymore. It's mine." To everyone hearing my story, let me say this. You don't have to live in someone's shadow. You don't have to carry their lies or let them define your worth. You can break free even if it means tearing down everything you once believed. If this hits home, tell me where you're listening from. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. There are more stories out there, and some like mine might just help you find your own voice. That's how I stepped out from under Colonel Victor Quinn's shadow. His world of lies fell apart, but my story's still unfolding. I've learned that real honor isn't about who's watching. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're the only one standing. If my story touched you, I'd love to know what you think. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. And hey, Give this a like. Subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next story we share. Here, we tell tales of courage, betrayal, and finding your way back. Stories that show justice and healing are always worth the fight. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.